90% of America's fresh tomatoes come from Mexico. That's more than $3 billion moving quietly across the border every year until now. On July 14, 2025, without warning, without a transition plan, the U.S. government hit every imported tomato with a 17% tariff. No speeches, no debates, just a single policy announcement and a wall of silence. Within weeks, prices spiked. In Raleigh, North Carolina, they jumped over 40%. At one local store, a mother picked up a tomato, looked at the price, and put it back. Salsa disappeared from restaurant menus. School salads lost their color. Across cities, shoppers asked the same question: what just happened? This wasn't about farming, and it wasn't about fairness. It was a shift, a break, a message. Overnight, the tomato became political. The same day the tariff was announced, the U.S. formally ended the 2019 Tomato Suspension Agreement with Mexico, a trade pact credited with keeping prices stable and supply chains smooth. That agreement had acted like a pressure valve for years, keeping disputes from exploding into crises. But this time, there were no negotiations, no committees, no warnings, just a 17% tariff, effective immediately. According to Axios and ABC News, there was no transition period, no delay for existing contracts. Tomatoes already loaded on trucks were taxed the moment they crossed into the U.S. Importers called it a blindside. Economists called it reckless. Grocers called it a crisis. Within 2 months, tomato prices in major U.S. cities were up 30 to 45%. In Raleigh, a pound of beefsteak tomatoes jumped from $2.99 to $4.35. In Los Angeles, Roma tomatoes went from under $1 to over $3.80. For working families, that's not just inflation, it's a cut into the weekly food budget. Salads disappeared from schools. Fast food chains swapped fresh salsa for processed paste. At home, tomato sauce got watered down to stretch one more meal. The economic toll didn't stop at grocery lists. In Florida, dozens of small, Latin-owned import businesses shut down within weeks. They couldn't absorb the price shock. Hundreds of Latino warehouse workers, drivers, and farm liaisons lost their jobs. Many had spent decades connecting U.S. markets with Mexican farms. Now, they were simply expendable. No press conference, no aid, just locked gates and pink slips. Even experts were caught off guard. MarketWatch warned in July 2025 that the collapse of the tomato supply chain could spread into packaging, refrigeration, and transport, dragging down small logistics firms and pushing up food prices across the board. Washington's justification was to protect American farmers, but protect who exactly? Florida's tomato season is short, and many northern states rely almost entirely on imports. California's production has been shrinking for years due to drought and labor shortages. While Washington celebrated protecting farmers, Mexico stayed quiet. There were no threats, no retaliations. Instead, engineers and logistics planners got to work. Within 3 months, a new cold rail corridor was running from Mexico's agricultural heartland through northern Chihuahua, turning east into Ontario and Quebec. No U.S. checkpoints, no customs backlogs, no tariffs. This was more than a workaround. It was a new trade route. Refrigerated containers kept produce at a steady 1 degree Celsius, giving tomatoes, berries, and peppers 4 to 5 extra days of shelf life. Canadian Pacific Kansas City confirmed the route cut logistics costs by 15% compared to trucking through the U.S. Soon, Canada's largest supermarket chains, Loblaws, Metro, Sobeys, weren't just buying from Mexico. They were locking in 5-year contracts. No speeches, no press releases, just signatures. Mexico wasn't coming back to the U.S. market. A senior advisor in Ottawa put it best: they didn't fight the tariff, they outgrew it. The loss wasn't just tomatoes, it was trust. Buyers who once routed through Texas began investing in cold storage in Montreal and Toronto. U.S. ports saw fewer shipments, fewer contracts. And back in the U.S., farmers, retailers, and shoppers were left watching trains of Mexican produce roll past, straight to Canada. Bloomberg Green projects that by 2026, nearly half of Mexico's fresh tomato exports will go to Canada, up from less than 1% just 2 years ago. And it's not just tomatoes. Strawberries, avocados, and bell peppers are all shifting north. Canadian executives didn't negotiate with Washington. They flew directly to Mexican farms, tested soil, tasted produce, and signed contracts through 2030. "We don't sign deals based on election cycles," one Metro Logistics director said, a pointed contrast to America's unpredictable trade shifts. Meanwhile, U.S. prices kept climbing. Supply chain analytics from A-Tools showed wholesale imported tomato prices up 22% in July 2025 alone. Retailers blame tariffs, inspection delays, and inconsistent enforcement. A Florida produce manager compared it to playing roulette with perishables. Canada, by contrast, enjoyed 8% cheaper landed costs per crate thanks to faster, more reliable routes. In border towns like Buffalo and El Paso, importers closed warehouses. In Windsor, Ontario, a new refrigerated storage facility opened fully booked into 2026. This wasn't just a tariff, it was a tax on the dinner table. Maria, a single mother in New Jersey, now skips fresh tomatoes altogether, buying canned beans instead. Tom, a retired welder in Texas, says produce aisles feel like luxury boutiques. The Wilson family in Detroit hasn't had a fresh salad in weeks. Even schools were hit. In Champaign County, Illinois, tomato wedges vanished from lunch trays, replaced with pre-packed shredded lettuce. One teacher said the kids noticed. They asked where the red was. According to Axios and ABC News, average U.S. tomato prices surged 30 to 45% in just 2 months. Some organic and heirloom varieties saw spikes of 60%. Fast food chains quietly dropped pico de gallo and fresh salsa. And still, the policy stayed in place. Critics argued the tariff was meant to protect U.S. farmers, but climate change, labor shortages, and water issues still plagued production. The real cost fell on consumers. By late July, the ripple effects spread globally. Rotterdam and Hamburg logistics firms mapped new cold chain routes from Brazil to Europe, avoiding U.S. ports entirely. Brazil signed a 5-year vegetable export deal with the Netherlands. Colombia and Peru redirected exports to Vancouver and Halifax. Then came East Asia. In August, delegations from Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan visited Mexico not for photo ops, but to study how it rebuilt exports without relying on the U.S. Bloomberg reported that Japanese and German firms are now exploring Mexican electronics hubs as alternatives to U.S. supply chains. Canada, reading the trend, began testing dual-language packaging that labels Mexican tomatoes as product of Canada under USMCA rules, legally sound and politically untouchable. A Canadian official put it plainly, "If the US wants chaos, we'll offer certainty." Even the European Central Bank noted in a July memo that global trade was slowly shifting away from US-centered routes. What began with agriculture could spill into cars, semiconductors, and biotech. The world isn't boycotting America, it's avoiding it. Quietly, efficiently, permanently. Today it's tomatoes. Tomorrow it could be circuit boards, brake pads, or syringes. Mexico didn't storm out. They walked away with precision. Canada didn't push. They simply opened the door. And American shoppers are left paying more for less, told it's protecting farmers, when in reality, it may be the first crack in a much larger break. Is this just a tomato war or the beginning of America's trade unraveling? Do you choose patriotic prices or practical groceries? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe these stories matter, subscribe to Money News and hit the bell. Your click fuels independent journalism and exposes the next policy disaster before it hits your fridge.